Hi, I'm Dr. Catherine Clements, the Ecology and Natural Resources Educator for University of Florida IFAS Sarasota County Extension. And we are here today at Manasota Scrub Preserve, one of our amazing Sarasota County preserves. And we're going to go meet my friend Dr. Abby Turna to see a little bit more. Let's go find her.
Hi, I'm Dr. Abby Turna. I'm a Water Resources Extension Agent at University of Florida IFAS Extension in Sarasota County. I'm also a wetland scientist. Reason 1 for why I love coming to Manasota Scrub Preserve. So many wetlands, specifically depression marshes that you have access to. Reason number 2 for why I love coming here, this Willowhead Swamp, located at Trail Marker 8 at Manasota Scrub Preserve. Reason number 3 for why I love coming here. As you're walking along the trail, you'll see these very small changes in elevation. Just a couple inches is enough for these areas to get filled with water during the wet season, which occurs June through September. Reason 4, there's a rich variety of Florida native wetland plants, like hatpins.
Welcome to Lemon Bay Park. My name is Natalie Smith and I'm a parks naturalist here with Sarasota County Parks, Recreation and Natural Resources. And we are here today to share some information with you about some mangrove species we find around Lemon Bay. And this park in particular is 210 acres of preserved natural area. Within this park we have 8 natural communities, one of which are mangrove forests. And so historically, perhaps 100 years ago, if you were to come out to Lemon Bay, it would have been surrounded by mangrove forest. Today, because of development and habitat loss, we've lost a lot of that really important mangrove shoreline that serves so many important functions. And Lemon Bay Park in particular has the longest remaining continuous stretch of mangroves left within Sarasota County. So when we talk about mangroves, we're talking about salt-tolerant plants that are usually either shrubs or trees, and they serve a variety of really important functions. They're actually one of the most productive ecosystems in Florida, and they also help us in a variety of ways. They help protect us against storm surge, they help stabilize the coast, and they are tremendous habitat for a variety of wildlife species, birds. It's a great resource for fisheries. So what we're going to do is we're going to head on out and we're going to see if we can find 3 of our mangrove species. All right, so we've walked down the trail a little bit and we've actually found all 3 mangrove species that you'd expect to find if you're out around Lemon Bay, kayaking, taking a walk or a hike. We found all 3 of them in one location, so this is going to be really cool. Now, mangroves, because of where they live, they've had to develop these adaptations that allow them to live in these really salty or brackish waters. So one way that they've kind of evolved and adapted to deal with the salt are in their root systems, and then they also have some adaptations that they've developed in their leaves. So we found right over here a leaf of each of the 3 species. Now, when we're talking about the 3 different species, we're going to talk about either a white mangrove, a red mangrove, or a black mangrove. So this first leaf we have right here, it has more of an oval shape. This is a white mangrove, and the best way I've found to identify white mangrove leaves is that if you look at the very tip of the leaf, there's a small indentation. Also, if you come down to the base of the leaf, there are these 2 little glands that you can see, and those are called nectarine glands, and those produce almost kind of a nectar that the mangrove will use. Also, and this is harder to see, so if you're ever out here and you find a white mangrove leaf, I would recommend picking it up and holding it up against the sunlight, because white mangroves have a really neat adaptation in that they have salt excreting glands kind of between the midrib and the outer edge of the leaf that run right down the center of each side. So that's a neat adaptation that white mangroves have used to deal with the salt water they live in. Now moving over here, this leaf is usually a little bit thicker And it's usually pretty uniform in color on the front and the back side of the leaf. Sometimes people say these have almost a blunted end on the leaf tip, but this is an example of a red mangrove leaf. And then finally, this is a black mangrove leaf. So for me, the easiest way to tell the difference when I'm looking at a black mangrove leaf is that the top is darker, and then when you flip it over, you have a whiter or kind of a lighter colored underside to that leaf. All right, so we just took a look at the 3 leaves of our 3 mangrove species, but now let's move over here and take a look at some of these really cool root systems that these trees have kind of evolved and used and adapted over time. So the first one, and probably the most recognizable root, are these big aerial prop roots that you'll see that are produced by red mangroves. And if you look out at the water, you can see that there's so much going on. You have roots above the water, you have roots below the water. So that just shows you how important they are in terms of habitat. Under the water, a lot of invertebrates use those, the fish use them, and they just provide so much structure and really neat hiding places for lots of wildlife to utilize. Now, down here in Florida, a lot of people refer to these as dead man's fingers, and these are pneumatophores. Really, these are kind of like a breathing tube that black mangroves have used or kind of evolved to use that help with atmospheric gas exchange. So in these conditions, if they were completely under the soil, under the water, it would be really difficult for this tree to exchange gases. So this is kind of a neat feature that they've evolved and developed. All right, now finally, kind of heading back to talking about the red mangrove. This is a propagule. Propagules are basically the seed of the red mangrove. And if you've been out in a kayak or if you've been out on a beach, you may have seen these. And they're just really kind of cool torpedo-shaped structures that will float through the water until they reach the substrate or the ground. At that point, and if you look down here, you can see all of them that are sprouting and they're creating new trees. So these are baby red mangroves that are sprouting right there. Thank you for joining us for this tour of Lemon Bay Park. Be sure to come out and check us out. We have a kayak launch here. We have a butterfly garden. We also have about 6.5 miles of trail you can explore. There's several pairs of resident bald eagles that come back to nest every year. Lots of gopher tortoises that you can see munching on grass along the trails. And of course, if you come out, see if you can find the mangrove forest and if you can identify the 3 species of mangroves we've talked about today.
Hello, I'm Diana Donahue, and I work for Sarasota County as an environmental specialist with Parks, Recreation, and Natural Resources. I'm the manager of South Venice Lemon Bay, which is where I'm standing. It is a 230-acre preserve that is situated alongside Lemon Bay. It contains 6 natural habitats, along with 25 acres of spoil material from dredging. The spoil is the dredge deposits from the dredging of the Intracoastal. Dredging began in the 1890s and ended in 1967. The Intercoastal Waterway fulfilled a need of the residents to have a safe passage for boats to transport goods, services, and people. It was a huge economic benefit, but it came at an ecological cost that has still not been repaid to this day. The dredging in the northwest corner removed approximately 400 feet of shallow grass flats and mangrove forest, creating a channel at a depth of approximately 8 feet. The dredge material was then deposited over scrubby and mesic flatwoods along the coastline. Dredge material is a mix of sediment composed of rock, crushed shell material, and sand. It has a high salinity content, a reduction in nutrients as compared to the adjacent upland soils, and drains poorly. In addition, the depth to the water table is increased in these areas. Because of these characteristics, most of the plants naturally found in the habitats that were covered by the spoil do not fare well in this substrate. Even after several decades, the evidence of spoil placement is easily identified, as seen here, looking at the large cabbage palms that appear to be stunted in height, but are very thick, indicating maturity. The vegetation coverage is also very sparse. Invasive exotic plants are often found in the spoil area, thereby providing a seed source that may be dispersed onto the adjacent natural habitats. Not only does the addition of the spoil affect the plant composition, but also the wildlife. There are some, such as the gopher tortoise, that can take advantage of the increased depth to the water table by digging their burrows into the spoil. But there are more animals that find little in the way of cover and food. This area would have been scrub or scrubby flatwoods, as indicated by the adjoining community. Florida scrub jays, a threatened species, reside in the adjacent scrubby flatwoods, but are not seen in the spoil area. They require scrub oaks for acorns, a main component of their diet. There are no scrub oaks found in this spoil area. It would be very costly to restore this back to scrubby flatwoods. It would take a commitment of time, resources, and money. If we had that commitment, the steps would be to determine the appropriate original habitat using historic aerials and historic accounts, removing the spoil material down to the natural soils, locate a disposal site for the spoil, and replant the appropriate native plants associated with the original habitat. We would then have to survey for invasive exotic plants and treat as needed. If the three commitments are not aligned, it is important to keep the exotic plants from establishing and continue to focus on the health of the intact habitats by using the tools of mechanical treatment and prescribed fire.
We are at South Venice Lemon Bay Preserve in a different area, and I'm going to talk about fire. For thousands of years, fire has shaped this landscape and the plants and animals that make Florida their home. So let's talk about prescribed fire. Why, you might ask, would someone want to burn an area of our beautiful Sarasota County preserves? Well, it's because prescribed fire is hands down the #1 management tool for our natural areas. Prescribed fire is like a prescription for the forest. What? No, really, it is. There are so many benefits to our natural areas of prescribed fire. Some of our trees and plants don't even release their seeds without the heat of the fire. And then some of those seeds don't even start to grow unless they have that same heat. Also, fire is really important for biodiversity. It helps to maintain a good number of species in our natural areas. And it helps to return necessary nutrients to the soil. Also, the animals that live here have adapted over those thousands of years to live in these fire-dependent communities. And if we didn't have fire, the gopher tortoises wouldn't have empty sandy soil to dig their burrows. They wouldn't have the native grasses that they so need to eat. The scrub jays wouldn't have a place to bury their acorns. And the tall trees would start to move into the short, scrubby oak areas. And then predators like hawks and owls would be able to perch on those numerous trees and eat our scrub jays. So prescribed fire has all of these benefits, not only for our natural areas, but prescribed fire is really important for us humans too. How? Well, because prescribed fire helps to manage the amount of fuel load on the ground or the amount of burnable material. So if there was a lightning strike out here, if there has been a prescribed burn, there will be less fuel on the ground, and if there is a wildfire, it'll be easier and safer to be able to put out before it damages the natural areas or your homes. So let's take a look at a few different management areas here at South Venice Lemon Bay Preserve.
So Sarasota County often does pre-treatment to areas that we're going to burn. We mow. And some people might ask, well, if you're mowing, why would you then follow that up with fire? Well, let me show you why we would follow that up. As you can see here, it's mowed to a nice lower height, but the vegetation is still on the ground, and I don't see any openings for areas that the scrub jays might cache their acorns. For that reason, we would need to burn, which also creates new nutrients for healthier plants, which also mean healthier acorns, which also benefits the scrub jays. We walked over to the other side of this corner. There's an area that was burned in the middle of 2020. Let's compare that. This area was burned in the middle of 2020, and it was mowed at the very same time the other section was that I just previously showed you. But with burning, the dry vegetation was burned off, creating these open sandy spots that you can see. And also, as I mentioned, with the renutriting of the soils, we've got some really good lush, low vegetation growing here as well. So comparing the mowed, not burned, we have a high thicket of dry vegetation, whereas with burning, we do not have that, and it's much, much better for wildlife. Everybody can get through it, gopher tortoises, and the scrub jays really love it. After the burn, we did have some visitors that expressed a little concern for the plants. They wondered if these plants were going to be able to survive the fire, if they'll grow back. It does sometimes look a little blackened and charred, but I can assure you that it does. As a matter of fact, we can compare this side that was burnt in 2020 to the other side that was burnt in 2019. It's only a year apart, and look at the growth. It's actually at a perfect height. Scrub jays like to have shrubs that are from 3 to 6 feet, although they can handle a little taller, but this is their preference. And with a scrub that is a little bit taller, we'll get nice acorns that they'll be able to harvest. So I hope you take the time to come out to see South Venice, Lemon Bay, walk the trails, go through the scrub, and you may even see a scrub jay. We also have eagles nesting here. Hope to see you soon.